Breaking news, folks. It looks as though the Nationals' leader, David Littleproud, is speaking. Shall we run this right now? Yep, let's go.
And to acknowledge what has been thrust upon this nation and what we must do to fix it. And that is what we as a nation have tried to do and as a parliament over the last couple of days. And the National Party did that in good faith. And we went down there to ensure that we faced up to the challenges that this nation now faces with anti-Semitism and the rise of radical Islam. That is what we are charged with the responsibility to do. That's what we take seriously in trying to achieve the outcomes to make sure that not just Jewish Australians are protected, but every Australian is protected, and that hard-fought right of freedom of speech is protected. That's the responsibility as legislators that we have and that we've undertaken. And the lens in which we made our decisions and worked collaboratively for the last 2-3 days while in Canberra. This was a rush process. We are talking about national security matters with complex legislation that should be scrutinised and understood before we're forced to vote on it. That was the disappointing fact of it, that we were prepared to come back to Parliament before Christmas to make a determination, even on the migration piece, that we supported. We believe that the Immigration Minister should have more powers to send people home, to deport those who come to this country, who are here as guests and then perpetrate and spew hate. They should be sent home. We supported that, and that could have been put in place before Christmas, and we could have started the process with the government in making sure that we got the other pieces of this legislation, particularly around hate speech and those organisations that espouse it, to be able to make sure that the free speech of Australians that has been hard fought is protected. That was the ideology that we went to Canberra on, and I made it very clear to everybody and to our coalition partners that we were prepared to support the migration changes on Sunday evening, but we had serious reservations about the freedom of speech and the listing of hate organisations. We have and still wish to see Hizbat Tahrir and also the neo-Nazis removed. We wanted to make sure, but that we got the right mechanism that didn't impinge on honest Australians' right to speak. That was the fine balance, and that was where our challenge was. And so on Sunday, I made that very clear to our coalition partners that my party room had made a determination on Sunday that we could only support the migration elements of this bill. We would work constructively, but and from that we would send to the Prime Minister principles that we could agree on, that he could come back with the amended legislation, and we would work constructively. We did that on Monday and through on Tuesday, in fact getting and securing many amendments, but we were actually asked to get to a position as the bill was being put into the Parliament. That's not a fair process, that's not a proper process for your legislators to go through. We made it clear, and we made every effort to ensure that we could get both bills through, and we weren't far off, but we just didn't have that comfort and we ran out of time. And we made it clear, and I had continually had conversation with Sussan Ley to bring her along and understand our position and the sovereignty of our room, in that the process needed to respect both rooms, and that if required a joint party room or a shadow cabinet be reconvened. But the reality was our room was working to it, but on Tuesday we got to that position just around lunchtime that we didn't have enough confidence and we would not support it. Now, I told Sussan Ley and made it very clear to her that we were in a position that our party room would vote against it, and that means I would vote against it. If my party room gets to a determination, I would vote against it. She asked, out of respect, that we had amendments, if we could put those amendments, and if they were failed, then consider voting a different way. I, out of respect to her, went back to our room and we started drafting amendments. Unfortunately, the House of Representatives vote came on, and out of respect to her, our Shadow Ministry did not vote and actually abstained from that vote until we were able to put our amendments that could only come up in the Senate. And we stuck to our word. Those amendments were put up in the Senate. They are actually lost in the Senate, and therefore our 3 senators who were in Shadow Cabinet and our other senator in the National Party, Matt Canavan, voted against that as the will of the National Party party room, as was our direction to them. That was their that was their responsibility to undertake and to go in and to make that. And when there had been no joint party room, there had been no further shadow cabinet meeting to determine beyond the principles of what we initially took to Anthony Albanese on the Sunday, the National Party acted in good faith all the way along. We acted in good faith to get to this position. But we could not be forced into voting for a position. The National Party is our own sovereign party. And Sussan Ley cannot force us to vote one way or another. And when we have not breached any process, any procedure of the coalition, we've been respectful for then to get to a position where 3 of our senators who are in shadow cabinet spots are being asked to resign on Wednesday morning. I sent those 3 letters that our senators prepared, along with a 4th letter on Wednesday morning to Sussan Ley. And those 3 letters were from those senators to resign their tenure, but I sent a letter advising Sussan Ley that if she accepted those resignations, because it would not be appropriate to, considering the circumstances we had, then our entire ministry will resign. We're not offering a resignation for her to accept or not. We are tendering our resignation. And subsequent to that, unfortunately, Sussan Ley has ignored that, and she will not, and from subsequent conversations, will not reinstate those 3 senators to the shadow cabinet positions. Therefore, the entire ministry resigned, but she has also forced the coalition into an untenable position that can no longer continue. This is not what the National Party want, but I cannot stand by and have 3 courageous senators who put their jobs on the line for no reason that has any veracity whatsoever to be disrespected, and our party processes and our decisions. That is the beauty of Parliament, that is the beauty of the democracy that we live in, that we should have the right to go there and have a difference of opinion. We accept there are processes within the coalition that we need to adhere to at times, but there was never a trigger moment for that. And if these 3 senators could not be accepted, then our coalition has become untenable. This process wasn't all Sussan Ley's fault. Anthony Albanese put her in this process, but it has been mismanaged by Sussan Ley, and there was a out yesterday to not accept these 3 resignations. She was aware of the consequences if she did, that the National Party were being forced into an untenable position around the coalition, and she still made that decision. This is not what we wanted, but can I say, just in closing before I end it, Kevin, how proud I am of the men and women in the National Party room. I've been there 10 years. I have never seen our party room more united in solidarity of one another, of the courage and the conviction of the people that are there to represent the Australian people in a way that in that moment, they're prepared to do what they believe in their conscience is the right thing. That's the courage of conviction that the National Party has. That is the beautiful thing of democracy that we should always protect. And this is the most disappointing moment that we had to get to, but unfortunately we find ourselves in it. Thanks, Kevin.
Look, thanks, David. If I could just pick up and accentuate a couple of points that David made. There were 2 obviously important processes that happened this week. First, I want to go through the process of the legislation and for us to try to land a position on the legislation. And as David said, this week was very unique and very different in the sense of the way Parliament was running. So we, as the Nationals Party Room, had a number of meetings about this legislation, and I want to acknowledge and I want to thank some shadow ministers, Michaelia Cash, John O'Duniam and Andrew Wallace. I think they did a lot of work to improve the legislation that Labor put a very complicated timeline on us to get to this. There are a lot of nuances in this legislation. When you're talking things about free speech and about freedom of what you can say or do, this gets into very complicated territory. And I thought those shadow ministers did a great job to move the dial to a place where we could get close to supporting. We had a number of discussions with them, in-depth discussions, micro discussions about the legislation. We landed, as David said, in a position that in good conscience, on principle, our room could not agree to. We did that in a very democratic style of the Nationals Party room, and straight away because of that, David, as our leader, transmitted that information to the Liberal leadership that we could not support the legislation in its current form. A lot of improvements, but there were just 2 or 3 sticking points that we thought on principle were too important to support. From there, what happened is, as David said, we gave some grace. We abstained in the House of Reps to try and amend the legislation in the Senate so we could support it. But we said very clearly then on Tuesday that if that legislation did not get through the Senate with our amendments, we could not support that legislation. And of course, not only would our senators could not vote for that, we in the House of Reps, if it came back with other amendments, we would be voting against that legislation in the House of Reps as shadow cabinet members. Shadow cabinet was a very different process this week as well, as David said. There was no joint party room this week either. So there were processes that weren't normal because of the timeline that the Prime Minister that he didn't allow us to do. So then once that happened, we were in a situation because we obviously had shadow cabinet members who had voted against that legislation. Yesterday morning, immediately, I reached out personally to a number of Liberal colleagues, and I know David did, to Sussan, to come up with a solution that this did not have to happen in the sense of what's happening right now. We saw a precedent in New South Wales where there was a disagreement over legislation there that the New South Wales Liberals and Nationals were able to agree to disagree and move on. A couple of ideas were put up about how it could work. The resignations could be not accepted. They could make a public statement about adhering to cabinet solidarity going forward, and a couple of other measures that I thought was a good solution. That was not accepted with their prerogative. That was not accepted by the Liberal leadership. So we followed our principles. We could not support the legislation. We transmitted that very clearly. We are definitely going to stand by our 3 senators who did this on a party principled position, and we did what we said we would do. We said if our 3 senators resign and that is accepted, the rest of the shadow ministry would resign. We transmitted that very early and well before that was done. So we are following through and doing what we said we would do. Thank you.
Mr. Littleproud, you talked about the position of the coalition being untenable. Is the coalition going to stay?
Yes, there's no other position. We cannot be part, our party room has made it very clear, we cannot be part of a shadow ministry under Sussan Ley.
What happens now then?
Well, we will sit by ourselves. We will sit and we will undertake what we have done. And I think we've got a pretty good record. There's 5 policies on the books for the coalition at the moment. All of those come from the National Party. So obviously we'll continue to formulate policy. And we'll continue to get on representing the people that have put us there. But we will do that with the courage and conviction that we've been asked to do. We will not be forced to vote a way that we can, in all good conscience, not support. And that, I would have thought, is what the Australian people wanted their elected officials. That in that moment, in our moment, we have the courage to do what's right, what we think is right. Otherwise, why be there? So this is not an easy decision that our party room made. But when we have 3 of our senators who had the courage of their conviction and did what our party room decided was the right thing to do, for them to lose their jobs, we can't accept that. And we made it very clear that there would be a consequence, and that if Sussan accepted those resignations, then that consequence is that the coalition would be untenable. It would be forced into a position that could not continue. She was aware of that. We made it very clear, and Kevin was in a number of those meetings with me where we understood the consequence. We understood the consequence of our decisions, but again, I made it very clear all the way through. I did never believe that there was any shadow cabinet position. I've never been in a cabinet or shadow cabinet where a final decision has been made on a bill that hasn't even been drafted yet, hasn't even been presented yet, and then didn't go through a joint party room. I mean, with all due respect, I get the circumstances that were presented, but process was important. We are talking about national security. We are talking about the rights of Australians that we were going to take away. I couldn't, in good conscience, not sit there and do the right thing, and that is where our party room got to. And my party room, as I would have respected the Liberal Party if they couldn't get to the same position on us as guns, would have respected that they had a different position and let them go their way. But on this, when proper process, there has been a failure of management here, and I am not going to stand by, because I was going to vote against this and just allow 3 of my senators be the fall guys. That's not how the National Party works. One in, all in, one out, we're all out. And the reality is that was made very clear to Sussan Ley all the way along. And it's disappointing we got to this position. But we're going to be the adults in the room. We're going to continue on doing what we do, standing up for the people that sent us there and take some common sense to Canberra. I'll go around. No one will miss out. No, it's done. I spoke to Sussan Ley about half an hour ago and made her fully aware. I gave her an opportunity yesterday after we had a party room meeting when she ignored the letter that I sent with those 3 resignations, that this would be the consequence that we are going down, that we would all resign, and that you would then see an untenable position. Had that conversation. She came back with a set of words last night that I put to the party room that still would not move on reinstating those 3 senators immediately. And so I rang her about half an hour ago and told her that the party room's decision was final, that unless those 3 were reinstated immediately, then she had forced the coalition into an untenable position.
Is there anything at all?
That's not a matter for the National Party, that's a matter for the Liberal Party. But we made our decision predicated on what has happened here. She was aware of the consequence of what was coming. I think we got pretty strong form on being upfront and honest, and if we say we're going to do something, I think she's even seen that 6 months ago. The National Party does what they say they're going to do, and that is because we have a party room that is convicted with the courage to come forward and stand up for what they believe in.
Is there anything at all?
Oh, well, it's too late now. These 3 will not be reinstated. So the reality is that we will move on and we will get on with the job that we've been sent there. You never close the door on anything in politics, but the reality is we're not going to sit idly by and allow 3 colleagues that we told to go and vote away because the party room, and that I was going to vote the same way if given the opportunity, that I'm going to stand by and let them be persecuted. They have acted with great moral integrity and courage. And that is what we are standing in solidarity with, and will always stand in solidarity with our colleagues. And it's unfortunate that we've been forced into this position, but that's the reality. So we'll get on with the job.
Just to be completely clear, though, there's nothing...
Hold on, I'll come to you, mate. Oh, yeah. Well, that's a decision for them, but we can't... there is no shadow minister that wants to serve in Sussan Ley's shadow ministry. That was made clear to us in our shadow cabinet, and we are in solidarity with those 3 senators, Bridget McKenzie, Susie McDonald, Ross Cadell, in what they have been forced to pay a price that was not necessary. And Sussan Ley understood the consequence if she did accept those resignations. They put those resignations in good faith, in trying to respect the coalition. This is the most disappointing thing. We have tried to respect the coalition and tried to have some understanding of the difference of opinion and position, and to have a way out and to say you just don't have to accept them. These were circumstances that was mismanaged, and if there was some courage of leadership and acknowledge that, then we could have averted all this. But when I, in good conscience, was going to do the same thing, I can't stand by and say I'm going to stay in a position. That would make me a hypocrite. It would make Kevin a hypocrite, and that's not how we operate. And this could have been averted. So we've been forced into this position, and it's deeply sad, but it's up to the Liberal Party what they do next. Sorry, you were quite boisterous, yeah.
Did the decision to continually call for this to be Parliament to recall and to rush this through in some way contribute to...
Well, no, this could have been averted. So the Migration Act that we supported, and that element of the bill, that was actually in the Siegel report. That was handed to the government back in, I think, June. That element could have been brought in because that recommendation had been sitting on the books. We could have come back and all agreed on that bill before Christmas, but also then start the parliamentary process of the scrutiny of a bill around hate speech and the groups within them. That would have allowed the time to be able to undertake a proper scrutiny of these bills. That's why we should have come back and had the opportunity to actually have a protracted and proper process around the scrutiny of these bills. That was not provided. And that's not Sussan Ley's fault. But the process from there on is one that she had to manage. And the fact that we've got to this juncture is the fact of the management of that position.
Leader David Littleproud has said that he will not vote for him about defecting to One Nation.
No.
How much of this One Nation, how much of One Nation's increase in the polls has had an impact on what has occurred?
Zero. We have always, and I think we have always been consistent around protecting the freedom of speech of everyday Australian. With that comes responsibility. But what was the important part of this bill is to make sure that there wasn't overreach. And the original bill that came before the National Party was, in credit to Michaela Cash and John O'Doniam, a lot better than where it started to where it got to. But it still didn't give us the comfort because we'd run out of time to be able to scrutinise it. In politics, if you start worrying about other people, you start making the wrong decisions. You look at the job ahead of you. That is what the National Party always has done for over 100 years, 120 years. We'll continue to do that because we believe in why we are there. The courage of our conviction of what we have just demonstrated, I think, shows that we actually are the ones that do have the courage to stand up, to actually hand it all back and to walk away if it's not right. I think that shows a national party, that shows a political party that has more courage than just saying no, but to try and find a solution to work forward, but in the end have the courage to say they are out if they can't get there.
Can you just walk me through exactly as well what happened on Sunday night? So obviously, I mean, did the Nationals agree to pass the amended clause? Did someone take it back? Did someone not being honest here?
Well, the reality is this: you can't approve a bill you haven't seen. The Prime Minister started a process where he split the bills and said, what can we come back to us about what are the principles that you could agree to so that we can redraft a new bill. Now, I made it very clear that we supported the migration changes but had serious reservations about the hate speech groups and that we didn't have comfort and would need more information and more time to be able to get that. But in principle, moving forward and working through that process, everyone had agreement in. But we had no line of sight of what the bill, it was the prerogative of Anthony Albanese to bring a bill back, not the coalition. And so he brought a bill back and then we scrutinised it, continued to scrutinise it. And at every step, we made it very clear to Sussan Ley that we had issues with that bill, and to Michaela and John O'Doniam's credit, they worked through to make it even better, but it didn't quite get there. But there was no process to say the bill that was tabled in Parliament went through shadow cabinet, or that could be debated or ruminated, or even through joint party room. That's the processes that gives us the comfort that even though we may make a sovereign position as a national party, usually is the off-ramp to say, well, look, we've sat and talked it out in joint party room. We weren't afforded that. No one was afforded that. So we've made it very clear. We were very transparent, very open with Sussan all the way along. And that's why it's so disappointing that she accepted those resignations, even when that letter was sitting there with her, that say the consequence of accepting those three resignations mean you are putting the coalition in an untenable position that cannot survive.
Just to be completely clear on that, there's nothing Sussan Ley can do to win back your trust?
Well, I spoke...
What, she's leader?
No. I spoke to her again this morning. She's very clear. She would not reinstate those three senators. She refused to do that. And I made it clear that our position was unless they were reinstated, we were out. So I'll keep coming around. Well, we won't speculate on anything. We're going to take our time. We gave them a go after the coalition split for the election. No, so what we do is look at the circumstances in front of us when they come. But, you know, I think there's time for the Liberal Party to reflect who they are and what they're going to do. And us being there probably allows them the opportunity to do that. We'll let them work through that, but you'll keep every opportunity open. But the reality is we're at a juncture where no one in our ministry could work in a Sussan Ley ministry, and my party room made that clear. And that's why the coalition was made untenable, because of this decision to sack our three. I can't answer that until circumstances are put in front of us. And it's not great to speculate about what could and may not and could happen. We're simply getting on. We've made a decision and we're getting on with where we're going from here on in. I didn't vote for the bill. I abstained out of respect to Sussan until our amendments could be tested. But had those amendments, did they fail and the bill was sent back to the House, myself and everyone else in the shadow ministry in the lower house was voting no. I made that very clear, that if the bill was returned to the House of Representatives, we were going to vote no. That was the respect that our shadow ministry showed to Sussan Ley in that moment. We were going to walk in and vote no. That was the decision. We went back to the party room after Sussan requested that we abstain those shadow ministers until we could test our amendments in the Senate. And that's what we did out of respect. But had that bill come back to the House yesterday, every National Party member was going to vote no.
Mr. Littleproud.
Yeah, hold on, no, come, yep. Look, tonight we do need to pause, and this is about our democracy, the hard-fought democracy that over 100,000 Australians have lost their lives defending. And tonight we will pause, and that's why I wanted to make sure that we made this clearly early this morning so that we can prepare for 7:01 this evening. But this is the democracy that will protect Jewish Australians. It will protect every Australian. Their right to speak, their right to feel safe in this country. This is about a democratic process that will protect Australians. So it demonstrates that our democracy works, and you have to make tough decisions. And the decisions that we make were about not just keeping Jewish Australians safe, keeping every Australian safe, and making sure that the hard-fought freedoms of speech aren't taken away. And ironically, the bill that we voted against and have been persecuted on was around freedom of speech. Well, the position that was...
Okay, for the second time in less than a year, the coalition is no more.